Uh, Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right? Excellent, thank you. Welcome to this session focusing on how we think about managing shocks and stresses and mobilizing the tools of economics to really ensure that we have effective adaptation and resilience. My name's John Matthews. I'm with the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. I have a fantastic panel today. I'm going to give a quick couple of slides just as background for the session, and we'll have each one of the panelists in turn give short comments, and then we're going to turn to more open discussion between the panelists and you, the audience. So we're grateful for you being here today, and excited about the topic. I'm going to first turn to Joachim Ringer. He's going to provide the opening points. He's the head of division on climate change, rural development, and infrastructure at GIZ. The floor is yours, Joachim.
Put this here. Can you hear me? Thank you so much. Hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends. On behalf of GIZ, German International Collaboration, I'd like to give a warm welcome to you. I'm very happy, delighted and honored to be here with you today to actually discuss water-based adaptation for economic resilience perspectives. And to unfold the potential and the untapped potential in particular of such a perspective. Together with our key partner, the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, we have developed recently a flagship report on managing water for economic resilience. This report actually raises quite important questions for a rather complex challenge, we must say and admit. And the question is simply how to communicate to economists and economic planners that resilience, in particular resilience regarding water, is really a key part of economic planning. Especially in times of devastating, climate change effects. We all know water is a lifeblood for our planet. It is essential for human well-being. It's the vital thing for economic and ecosystems. And it's, really the very core of all or most economic sectors. However, the pressure, on global water resources are constantly increasing. That's a matter of fact, due to growing demands, and due to the effects of climate change. And the climate crisis is in many ways a water crisis. And so we really have to conclude that water is to adaptation what energy is to mitigation. But this also means, despite of all doomsday scenarios, that also means that there is a way forward and there are solutions. And we at GIZ, we are very gracefully to have this collaboration with the AGWA. And let me quote John, who said last year in the NASDAQ meeting, climate change is often seen as a risk multiplier. However, sound water management is a resilience multiplier. So we simply have to change the perspective in order to move forward. This perspective is more and more perceived also in the economic and business arenas. I had the chance to attend the COP16 in Cali recently, and I was amazed, to be honest, how far the financial industry is. I mean, talk to the banks of Asia and the US. They are doing really a great job in analyzing risks, and they are somewhat afraid of what is happening in the biodiversity sphere. So There are many companies already on a good way identifying, water resilience risks in their supply chains. For instance, I talked about the financial industry, but also investors, take water risks into consideration. However, the let's say the diversity of water risks simply means there is no silver bullet, of course, and there is no kind of one-size-fits-all solution for improving water resilience and therefore economic resilience. Adaptation and mitigation efforts in areas where you do have a lot of water scarcity is something different compared to areas where you have flood management problems. GIZ is addressing all these issues by appliance, exactly the water resilience for economic resilience approach. On a number of levels. First level, or let's call it action area for us, is that we love to work with Agua and other partners to further develop the concept and to bring forward the concept, to do a lot of outreach work. This is also the reason why we are here at the COP. Second thing is we really work as GIZ. GIZ is an implementing agency owned by the federal authorities of Germany. So we are practitioners, let's put it that way. And we do a lot of groundwork together in our partner countries to create kind of success stories, how this actually works. Coming from a water adaptation perspective to this economic resilience picture. So we do have quite a number of examples worldwide, and we also experience that the private sector is very interested, and it's not only the private sector. It's also the Ministry for the Economy, it's the Ministry of Finance, all these, non-traditional water sector actors, they get engaged more and more, to be honest, a little bit slowly, but that's part of the history. And thirdly, there is, our perspective is also there is a need for a more coherent and modular approach. So it's all about synergies and coherence, and I'm happy that the World Bank is with us this morning over lunchtime. That's actually great news. So we try actually to join forces between, financing and capacity development. As we move forward, we have to acknowledge, or we have to realize, and we have to stress our focus on that resilience is a shared responsibility. It's all about administrations, it's about businesses, it's about communities, it's about stakeholders. They must work together to actually implement measures that reduce the risks caused by extreme weather events. And by doing so, we do not only protect the resources of this planet, but we build more resilience and a more prosperous future for all. So, in conclusion, let me make use of this event and my speech to, highlight that this is a great opportunity we do have to focus on, water-based adaptation for economic resilience. There is so much potential in it. The key findings of the report we will also present here. We will talk about that. Let's exchange ideas about that, and let's make the best out of our findings for future-proof economies. So I'm very happy to be part of this the journey, and thank you very much for being with us, for your commitment, for your dedication, and I'm looking really much forward to a fruitful discussion now and to further build, collaborations and partnerships, which we are in a very need for. Thank you very much.
Excellent comments. I'm going to provide a few introductory slides. There's a lot of innovation that's happening in the space around resilience. My favorite story about the word itself, resilience, comes from a trip that I made in 2008 to China. I was working with translators, traveling across China and giving lots of talks and training, meeting with different types of policymakers across the country on climate, and especially climate and water issues. And at the end of the trip, just as I was pulling up to the Beijing airport to leave the country, my translators turned to me and they said, "We feel a little embarrassed, but but we've been translating the word resilience and the word adaptation into Mandarin, and we need to confess something that actually in Chinese those words don't mean very much." And I said, "It's okay. In English they don't mean very much either." And what I would like to think is that these words actually have developed a lot more meaning over the past 15 years. But they're still evolving. This phrase, water-based adaptation, it was lost a little bit with the invasion of Ukraine, which happened at the same time as the launch of the last IPCC report. But it's a very powerful idea that the IPCC's one of their top-line recommendations is that water needs to be at the center of adaptation. And the connection to economics is actually really important too. I'm a biologist. I'm not an economist, and in talking with my economics colleagues, one of the things I feel like I've really learned at its most basic level, it's not about about dollars or euros or pounds. What it's really about is the science of what we value. And there are lots of non-financial ways that we assign value. And economics as a discipline, it's the language of development, but we haven't really brought the word resilience into that language yet. And that's the discussion of today. So most adaptation resilience programs really focus on communities, ecosystems, individual investments. But at a higher level, can we think about whole economies themselves becoming resilient? And that's a conversation that isn't happening in any country. Most developed, least developed. It's a new discussion. And we typically try to evaluate in the OECD numbers and in World Bank numbers, we try to say if an economy is succeeding by looking at growth, productivity, efficiency, and optimization. But an optimized economy is probably not going to be a resilient economy. So how is it that we begin to apply the emerging ideas and principles and concepts of resilience into economic planning, management, and operations? Well, one of our central insights, there's Water Resilience for Economic Resilience is a consortium. We have 6 national governments that we're working with, a lot of national development banks that we're working with. And we collectively view water essentially as the lens, the medium for resilience. In economic language, I would say that actually water is the currency of resilience. We spend our water on the things that are actually going to be able to maximize their resilience returns. That's where we need to be able to value the resilience through the water itself. And this is actually an emerging insight in the climate community too, that most of our climate problems are really water problems. And as our keynote suggested, most of our solutions are also our water solutions, especially water resilient solutions. So we're trying to maximize benefits across both climate, but also non-climate issues too. We can have political change, we can have social change, trends like urbanization and demographic shifts. These are also resilient shocks in their own mechanism. So opening up this broader space around resilience and economic thinking is really important. In the US, for instance, right now, one of our major new water consumers is actually AI. And it's completely unregulated. There's about, in writing a draft letter through ChatGPT, I spend about a glass of water. That's a massive increase as our economy shifts into new directions. We have to really be able to bring that into our thinking. That itself is a kind of impact that we need, resilience thinking that is not just about or limited to climate impacts by itself. So, and one of the challenges that we have in the discipline of economics is that most economists treat water in their language as a stock rather than as a flow. They treat water as a number on a spreadsheet, that this water is going to magically appear. Instead of, we need to think of this as a variable. This is something that we need to carefully manage and parse across our sectors, our institutions, even national boundaries. How do we, especially as we intensify water use with additional climate change, as the water cycle itself becomes more variable, how do we make sure that our economies aren't just de-risked, but they can actually prosper, that they can grow wealth, that they can really succeed with a shifting climate? That's a profound revolution in economic thinking, and it's a necessary one for all of us at the most basic level. So a few priorities that we've identified collectively: we need to prioritize resilience in economic planning. We need to look for water that's often hidden when we think especially about economic growth. The waters, say, in net zero initiatives with new energy mechanisms, there's often a huge amount of water that's embedded inside of them. But we haven't thought about where that water may be competing with agriculture, with public health, with ecosystems. And then we also need to clearly and explicitly, and when we can, quantitatively assess water resilience as a prerequisite for financial feasibility overall. We have a fantastic set of speakers today that are going to play out these ideas. Hope you'll use the QR code to download the report that we've launched. We'll have another report coming out next year and an additional set of cases. So we're going to move the order that we'll be moving in. We'll start with Gary, then we'll move to Chuck. Chuck has a short presentation, then Dani, and then Esmita. So I'd like for each one of the speakers to provide your short comments, but starting with Gary. Gary White is the CEO and co-founder of Water.org, a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people in the developing world to gain access to safe water and sanitation. He developed Water.org's Water Credit Initiative, creating new finance options for poor populations to meet their water supply and sanitation needs. Gary also developed and now leads Water Equity, an innovation of Water.org that focuses on raising and deploying social impact investment capital. For over 25 years, Gary has driven innovations in the way water and sanitation projects are delivered and financed. The floor is yours, Gary, please. Yeah.
On.
Got
there
it.
we go. John, thank you. I feel like I just had a graduate level course in economics and I just showed up for freshman econ. So thank you for that and helping us set a whole new framework for thinking about these things, which it is important to kind of be able to zoom out to see how all of these pieces fit together. I know myself, I do get focused in very narrowly sometimes in terms of resilience in the water sector, particularly when it comes to resilience for low-income populations. And I don't apologize for that. But I do see value in bringing some of those insights that we have at Water.org and Water Equity to the conversation to see how it does roll up into this wider economic resilience. So thanks for helping us translate. So Water.org is a water NGO. We rely on philanthropic capital to help low-income populations get access to water and sanitation. But we also realize there's never going to be enough philanthropy or charity in the world to get resilient water to 2 billion plus people. And that's why we created an asset manager, which is called Water Equity. Water Equity is the world's first asset manager that's focused exclusively on water and sanitation solutions for low and middle income countries, particularly within that context, low income populations there. And we see resilience coming from two directions. At the household level, there are a lot of people who are already experiencing these shocks. Women who maybe had a natural water source nearby their home now are walking hours to get water. I was just in Indonesia recently, and women whose wells are going dry because of climate change, springs going dry. And so when we think of how do we really get down to the human level of where it really makes a life or death difference, as well as an economic difference in terms of how much time and energy and cash they're putting into purchasing water from informal sectors, informal vendors. How do we help them get them more water resilient? And we do that by wrapping kind of a financial ecosystem for water and sanitation around them. And so Water.org pioneered something called Water Credit, which is actually using philanthropic capital to nudge the microfinance sector and increasingly the broader financial sector towards WASH loans for improved water and sanitation, so that woman in Indonesia could take out a loan to get connected to the water utility now, so she becomes more resilient. So that she might have a couple of dollars a day to pay a water vendor, but she doesn't have the $300 or $400 it takes to pay the connection fee. So what we found is with this model, we now have 150 financial partners around the world who provide these loans to low-income women. More than 84% of the borrowers are women, and they repay these loans at a rate of 98%. So there is a real way to connect the capital markets to them, and that's what Water Equity does. Now, these loans have generated water and sanitation for over 74 million people who are now more resilient because they had access to finance. And that has churned almost over $6 billion in capital. That's capital that didn't have to come from philanthropy. So the resilience in this is at the household level, but the resilience is also in the financial flows. If we can create, and we have created, the financial plumbing that will connect those low-income women with the global capital markets, then we also have a way of scaling this that's more resilient. If you can provide competitive financial returns for investors while at the same time helping them get water solutions at the household level, that brings a whole wrapper of economic resilience around water resilience. The next question comes in, what if there isn't infrastructure for these women to connect to? And what if that infrastructure is failing? What if the water losses in that infrastructure are 50 or 60%? That is the next phase of what we're doing with Water Equity's fund. So we just launched our 5th fund. This fund is focused on water and sanitation, but it's climate resilient infrastructure. So it's a $200 million fund, and we've raised about $110 million of that to be able to deploy with co-investors in low-income countries, working through public-private partnerships, co-investors at the local level, and then also working with a project development company that we've created, because you often hear there are no bankable deal flows in the countries, and so how we can use our project development function with co-developers locally to enhance the deal quality so that Water Equity can invest in that along with other investors. So we see this water resilience from the economic perspective as access to finance for the bottom-up households, but also the top-down infrastructure providers to make sure that the whole system will make everyone more water resilience. And I can't imagine something more foundational to economic resilience than having people have access on a sustainable, reliable basis to water so that they are not being disrupted every day and spending countless hours and lots of money to solve that problem.
That's fantastic, and such a powerful example of how the way that we actually expand the water circle is by moving a little upstream to think of it as an economic and financial problem that we can then leverage and really deepen the pool of access. I'm always amazed at the numbers that I hear from water.org. Thank you very much. Chuck Chidovitz is the Vice President for Environmental Affairs and Sustainability at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. For more than 25 years, he's specialized in environment and energy issues. He's been a colleague of mine for a good 15 years at least. Working with companies and strategies to improve their bottom line and competitive positioning. His experience in managing multi-stakeholder coalitions is underscored by his earlier tenure as Executive Director for the U.S. Water Partnership, a public-private partnership of more than 120 U.S. private sector, government, and civil society organizations to mobilize the best of U.S. expertise to address water challenges. The floor is yours, Chuck.
Thank you so much, John. AGWA has really been a great partner of the Chamber and certainly of the USWP when we were just launching these efforts. I really want to commend Gary and really highlighting the importance of resilience for people. I think that's something that I think needs to be underscored as we look at this. What I'm going to talk a little bit about is how transferable research can be in showing the economics of resilience, that there is a payoff back to the economy for thinking ahead and investing in resilience and pre-disaster mitigation infrastructure and measures. And that's really hard because you're investing in something now for the payoff later. And that's something that isn't exactly seeable for many people. And so I'm just going to show one slide here and talk a little bit about what that means. So we've been looking at the U.S. Chamber, and for those of you that don't know the Chamber, we're the largest business trade association in the world, representing companies of all sizes and sectors. Resilience is an important consideration for our member companies because they need to understand the risk to their businesses, their customers, and their employees of shocks to the economy. And so really important that they look at these and how they might prepare ahead of those crises. And there's some statistics in the United States that show that 65% of small businesses don't have contingency plans in place. And what that means is, from a practical perspective, is that companies, and the largest number of companies in the U.S. is small businesses, don't plan ahead for those shocks to the economy, especially from things like extreme weather. There's an old number that's been out there for a long time that for every dollar invested by public sources, so by the federal government, you get $6 back to the taxpayer. So that's in terms of reduced losses from impact of natural disasters. What it didn't look at is the impact on the economy. And so what we did is look at 25 statistical areas in the United States, so 25 separate communities, different geographies, different sizes, and different disaster types, so droughts, floods, snow, and so forth, and look at what those impacts would be on the economy. And what we found was, for every dollar you invest in that, you get $7 in savings for the economy. And so that doesn't mean that there will be no losses, but what it does mean is that the economy will be able to recover more quickly, and therefore people will be able to recover more quickly. So the total payback is, for every dollar invested in resilience or pre-disaster mitigation measures, you'll get $13 back in economic savings. and that's better for the economy and better for communities and people as you look at that. I'll stop there. John, happy to answer any questions and to dive in as well.
Fantastic, Chuck. A great testimony to how we need to make sure that, especially for extreme climate events, that this is also an investment challenge, not just a disaster response challenge, and that there's an amplifying effect that really comes from treating resilience in this manner. So. Here's the QR code for the report that Chuck was just mentioning if you're interested in it. I'm going to now turn to another longtime friend and colleague, Danielle Gaillard-Picher. Danny is a senior advisor of international processes and policy at the Stockholm International Water Institute, SIWI. She has nearly 2 decades of experience in water, sanitation, and development policy and collective action. She's been heavily involved in UNFCCC COP processes since 2015, and I think our partnership goes back even farther than that, right? Yeah. So, and most recently was project lead for the Water for Climate Pavilion at COP28, and we're borrowing her from the Water for Climate Pavilion right now. They'll probably come and grab her and take her away in a minute. She was previously employed as senior specialist for global processes at the Global Water Partnership and technical coordinator for GWP's climate program. Prior to that, she also was at the World Water Council and led their policy programs. So, Danny, can you tell us about how you see these issues playing out in the sphere of climate policy?
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. So I also have to preface this conversation by saying I am not an economist. I am not a hydrologist. I'm not an infrastructure specialist, but I am a social scientist. And I am really excited about bringing people together to do things together that they can't do individually or that reinforce the value of what we can do. And through collective action. So that's the exercise that we are doing through the Water for Climate Pavilion, is bringing people from every horizon together to try and speak with one voice for the importance of water in climate policy through some of our messaging, through the relationships that we can build with different parties and different stakeholders. So, so that's the perspective from which I'm speaking. So. And also, as a social scientist, I agree with what's been said before, that really, the reinforcing the resilience of populations is really about how people experience climate change, right? So how do they change, how do they respond to the stressors and the shocks that they experience? And first and foremost, not everyone is affected the same way. So people who are suffering from poverty and marginalization, for example, express they feel the impacts of climate change to a much greater extent than those who are protected from those shocks and stressors. So what I'd like to say is that I think that those are the populations, those populations that are really suffering the most. That needs to be at the crux of our first priority in building resilience. So, and with that in mind, I'd also want to just draw on what was said before about building women's resilience, because it shows that when you build the resilience of women in communities, it actually benefits the entire community. And communities actually recover faster from shocks when women are supported technically, socially, and economically. So I'm not going to go into the whole reasoning of why that's important, because there are lots of statistics that I'd love to share with you at another time. But getting back to the initial question about policy coherence, we see that climate really affects everything, and that water is the thread that can bring these things together. So if you increase resilience around water, and do that through processes that create coherence between sectors, you can really go much further than being involved in silos. So we can't build resilience without good governance and these harmonized policies, and doing that through a multi-stakeholder process where the populations that are affected actually have the opportunity to participate and to be involved in the decisions that affect them. Unfortunately, what we see is a lot of times those soft processes that we like to call them are not financed or planned for in the same way as hard or technical solutions are. But they're every bit as much important to building resilience. So if you do address the governance issues and the water issues and the harmonization issues, then you should have adaptive and integrated policies that are tailored to context and that really go forward with the with collective policies that address all the things in a systemic and holistic way. The problem that we see, though, is that the financing infrastructure is not set up in a holistic way, right? So you can have harmonized policies, but the finance ministries, for example, are still going to finance according to their ministries. So I think that there is something to be said that we really need to address what the financing architecture looks like in order for those policies to work better. I've lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. And just coming back to gender, there is also approaches where called gender budgeting, where you actually make sure that there is financing available for processes that address gender issues so that we can elevate that as well. So that's what I'd like to share. Thanks.
Fantastic, Danny. Thank you. Maybe in the Q&A too, we can also talk, I think there's some really interesting trends that are emerging about exactly the issues that you raise and how they're expressed right now through some of the draft versions of the NDCs and NAPs right now, and how they might become essentially a new instrument for thinking about how we mobilize water through these climate policy instruments too. I'd like to now turn to our last panelist. Asmita Tiwari is the lead climate change specialist in the World Bank. She's as she mentioned to me before the session, she's in operations. She's a practical person. She works on projects and funds projects in the World Bank. Is on, I think, one of the global leading teams of any institution in terms of how they think about systematically on climate change issues. She particularly has worked on flood risk management, hydromet services and early warning and response systems, DRR issues, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, North Africa, and South Asian regions. Very impressive set of geographies as well. And has led regional multi-country interventions, like in the Horn, which is quite relevant and interesting. Before that, I guess you worked for FEMA in the US. So the floor is yours, Asmati. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Very happy to, people can hear me, right? Okay. Very happy to be here. You rightly said I'm not an economist, I'm a practitioner. But today I'm here to talk about CCDRs. These are basically analytical reports, country climate and development reports that the World Bank has been doing for last 3 years. We have looked into some 73 countries, mostly lower and middle income ones. and we have looked into their sort of development priorities from the climate lens. And what the CCDRs have done is to really put a number. I mean, we all know water is important for development, water is important for adaptation, but we are able to then work with the countries to say, okay, what do you mean in terms of numbers? How are you getting affected? What investment do you need? How beneficial it is? And we have heard from many speakers in terms of the benefits of investing in water. But I mean, I can put into the 4 buckets in terms of the key findings from CCDRs. So what we did is we looked into the summary of all these CCDRs. The first one is in terms of the impact on economy. So obviously, there are different pathways that the water is affected by climate change. One is in terms of the agriculture and energy production. And we know that many countries, for example, Egypt, because of the sea level rise, is going to be affected by water, and it can lose GDP up to 1%, for example. Poverty is affected. So we had a study done in Malawi which looked into an individual, the probability of falling into poverty because of a drought shock is almost 14%. So CCDRs were able to put in those numbers out there in terms of making case for investment. Second, in terms of priorities, there were many common priorities which emerged from CCDRs. One important one is in terms of developing storage capacity, whether it's water for hydroelectricity or for agriculture. That was the key priorities. The second one is in terms of coming up with intersectoral programs, and Danny, you talked about that, how for water, many interventions are intersectoral, and it's complex. It's difficult. Our governments are not set up for that, but that's really what's required. Intersectoral programs that link agriculture, forest use, and water are important, and many of the CCDRs have identified that. Nature-based solutions, improvement for water tariffs, these were all common priorities. I mean, I have myself worked in a number of countries. One challenge that I see, and this is an example from Accra, Ghana, where we were developing a project and we were looking at $1 billion investment over 10 years on flood resilience. And this project was cutting across everything: solid waste management, better governance, sanitation, improving informal settlements, early warning system, hydromet. All of these were needed to make people resilient. And this is a rather complex and long-term agenda. In terms of the investment needs, these are huge. We identified that almost $1.8 trillion are needed, especially in the low and middle-income countries that we looked into. But the investment benefits are huge, and many of the speakers also talked about it. If you invest that much, you're going to get $7 trillion in investment benefits. But we also identified that even with this kind of statistics, water is actually not getting the type of investment it should get compared to other sectors. And there are many reasons. One reason is private sector involvement, and there's more that is needed there. In terms of what the bank is doing, so we are doing quite a lot of work in this area with our partners. We have a Global Challenges program that builds on the CCDR findings. We are working with a number of stakeholders there, and I think we definitely need to join forces as we move forward. We, with the MDBs, are having country platforms where we are working under a country leadership to identify opportunities. But again, here, a lot more is needed in terms of working with private sectors, working with different stakeholders and partners, and really making a big difference as we move forward. So in summary, agree with everybody who spoke before me, and that adaptation, especially through water, is critical for our economies. And I do hope that we continue to build this momentum as we move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Asmita. These CCDRs, that stands for Climate Change Development Report, they are really, from my perspective as an outsider, I've never been involved in them before, but they are really negotiated documents between the World Bank and a finance ministry. They are co-written together. It's not an independent report. So when they put it together, it's essentially a mitigation and adaptation plan for the country and how they need to think over their larger strategy across many sectors, across thinking about issues like capacity and bringing other sources of investment beyond the World Bank itself. Also the country mobilizing its own resources too. They're very impressive. There are about 50 of them, is that right?
So yeah, we have 58, but just to clarify that these are mostly, for now driven by World Bank. These are World Bank document, which is then informing our country partnership framework.
Yeah.
And in terms of operationalizing, this is what we do in terms of working with the countries. These are not negotiated with the client countries for now.
I appreciate the correction. What I would encourage you with these 58 countries to actually read them. I've read more than my share of them. I find them very impressive as essentially kind of a new generation of document. So what I'd like to do now, I'm going to turn over to my colleague Pani. She is an Agua Policy Associate. She's going to moderate the discussion with the audience. And she's also a PhD student in resilience and engineering, a student as well at Oxford. So we're really excited and honored to have a young, brilliant professional with us.
Thank you very much, John. And the first thing that I have to comment is that everybody kind of said that we're not economists before you start your intervention, which is quite interesting. But also that is kind of quite saying that the sector, the people who are working on the ground, working with projects, working with policy, are really calling for the resilience thinking to be embedded in our economic plannings and in our kind of like microeconomic policy, to be building the resilience for the communities and also building the projects. So I would like to turn to the audiences today. I have a set of questions, but I don't want to start from my side. And I think you have heard a lot of thinkings from different perspectives, different angles. So if you have any other questions, I would like to, give the floor to you. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me well? My name is Francisco Garcia, and I work for Evidence Action. We're an NGO focused on scaling evidence-based and cost-efficient solutions, partnering with governments. And we work in the nutrition and wash spaces primarily. My question is around, I've seen and I've appreciated there's been a consensus on the importance of human-centric approaches, thinking of water adaptation and water resilience in terms of the beneficiaries or the people that we intend to reach. However, I've also noticed that we haven't really talked about water quality. We haven't really talked about how good is the water that we're providing to these people, to also sort of like put on the last piece on that puzzle. My question is, what do you think have been the barriers in this general discussion when organizations, both big and small, think about water adaptation and resilience, to include the last piece of water quality and make sure that the people that receive this water is safe to drink?
So I maybe could jump in on that. Certainly, water quality is critical to health, but what we also see is that the willingness to pay for water access is pretty strong. And we see the evidence of that in terms of the 74 million people who've gotten access to microloans to solve for their problem. A lot of those loans have actually gone to water quality because that's what households want. So when that demand is there, they have access to capital to get a water filter or some other kind of treatment device. So our belief is that the solutions have to emanate from what people want, and as opposed to coming in from the outside as an NGO saying this is what you're going to get. And so I think that is key to it. That said, there has to be a strict pursuit of high water quality in infrastructure and systems, and we know that that's not there. But we also know that one of the reasons is that the infrastructure and the utilities are underinvested in to be able to do that. They're kind of doing their all just to get water out there at a reasonable quality, and then at the household level is where some of that quality comes in. So I think that's key to it. I think what Evidence Action is doing is pretty amazing, trying to really put the spotlight on water quality, even in some of the most rural places around the country. And I think that not everyone in the world, there's 2 billion who don't have access to safely managed water. They're not all going to get water access through something like water credit and microfinance. But that, if we can reach hundreds of millions of people with those financial tools, that frees up a lot of capital from government to focus on water quality issues and water treatment, even down to the village level. So to me, it's an all hands on deck problem. Let's bring in as much capital as we can to solve as much of the problem as we can. And that first problem does tend to be access as opposed to quality. And then you can kind of climb that ladder that's referred to in the WASH sector to get up to the quality level that's needed for human health.
Thank you so much. I listened to Danielle, the presentation that you have given, and I'm happy that you mentioned the importance of ensuring women are involved in issue of water resilience. And I'm just kind of really concerned, and that has been my concern always, is that usually the big water projects that are done, and I'm sorry, just to mention one example, is like sometimes by World Bank, because it's happening in my community, and the money is given to it's a partnership between World Bank and government. And of course the people will be involved, but it will be really small mention. But this project will start. We see the construction of water, the construction of offices, water management, wherever. Then when the water is complete, is when we as women are brought in to join a committee that will be managing the water kiosk, that small water kiosk. We do not have any idea on where to report if anything is going wrong. We don't know the budget that is involved in this, so we can't monitor. The management at the high level, there is a real cut down, so we are just joining a committee of like market management committee or whatever, and you are now nominated to join this water kiosk management. I think this is where I am really worried that if we position women at the water kiosk management and not in the discussion of designing the water project, it's a complete failure, because you cannot do anything when you are at the kiosk management like what you would have done if you participated in the designing of this water process, understanding the procurement process, who is responsible for what kind of items are required, the budget involved, so that you can be able to monitor. And it doesn't require just one woman to be nominated. It requires our organized groups of women to be involved in this process, where I am nominated to represent my community or my groups of women, and there is communication flow and there is information, as you said, on the budget. There is sensitization, awareness raising of how this project is going to run. So that is where there has been a total disconnect, and everyone will keep saying, we brought women there on the water management kiosk, and celebrate and take a picture of women sitting on the water kiosk management, or a woman fetching water and drinking, and everyone will be clapping their hands. But then the real landscape on how this water design of the project is happening is usually never talked about. Thank you.
Yeah, I can come in. Thank you so much. Very humbling to know, and very happy to see your passion about it. So the World Bank finances many different types of projects. I don't know which project you're talking about, but your concerns are well taken. Usually there are big infrastructure projects, but we do also finance what's called locally led climate adaptation. And in those projects, we start really with, as you are mentioning, right? We work with communities, and the decision in terms of designing is through the community. But there are definitely bigger projects that looks into sort of bigger infrastructure, and that's where good to know. I don't know specific details here. Maybe this is an example that we need to look into. But my own involvement in many projects involving community is very, very important, not only at the last stage, the last sustainable or operation and maintenance stage, but really from the beginning in terms of what the design should be, what are the community requirements, and then really reflecting that in the design. I was involved in a number of informal settlements, low-income settlements planning, and this is what we did from beginning. And this is where we have actually seen that the sustainability is more for project. If you involve the community from beginning, then this infrastructure is sustained for longer time. So all those points are well taken. Thank you so much.
Yes? Thank you so much. I'm from Liberia. I work for the National Disaster Management Agency. Liberia is in West Africa, and Liberia has abundant water resources. That is over 50,000 per capita cubic meter of water Liberia has. Liberia is from a devastating 14 years civil war, one of the poorest countries in Africa. But water resource management in Liberia has become like a curse. We have 2 seasons in Liberia. During the rainy season, you have so many outbreaks of waterborne diseases because of the condition of our water and the condition of our water resource management. And then also during the dry season, water becomes very scarce because most of our population depends on water from the underground sources. So most of these waters are from shallow wells and boreholes and hand pumps. So that makes it very difficult for the women who are, most importantly, I would say the end user of water, especially our rural women who walk distances to go and fetch water for their family. So water resource management in Liberia has really become a problem. It is a major problem. Like she rightly said, when it comes to the policy issue, where women supposed to be brought at the forefront, where the voices are supposed to be heard, it's not like that. Because most of these policies are from the top to the bottom. The bottom or the end users are not being integrated or incorporated during the formulation of this policy. So me sitting here today, I'm very impressed, and I just want to welcome you all to come to Liberia to partner with us, because actually we are really facing a serious problem. So sitting here today and saying water-based adaptation for economic resilience is very important. With the amount of water resources, the abundant resource of water we have in Liberia, yet we don't have stable electricity. Or let me say, we just don't have electricity. And so many resources that water, we can benefit from water, we don't have. So I just want to tell you thank you, and I want to see you all in Liberia. We actually want to partner with you. Thank you.
No, use your microphone. But yeah, there you go.
Thank you for all the comments, and then we are taking in a bit, but we are also a bit running out of time. So I'm going to give back to John to have a closing remark, because we heard from our audiences about why inclusive thinking is also necessary in the resilience planning, and then going beyond water towards the economic thinking as well. So yes, please.
Thank you, Pani. And I want to start off by acknowledging that when we're thinking about economic resilience, I think your story from Liberia, your words too, very much show that economies are not just for a whole country, right? It's for a village. and we need to think about economic resilience at that level. And what I'd like to say that if we're smart, if we're really effective, then we don't think just about isolated projects. We try to organize those hopefully good projects that involve communities at that bottom level. We organize those individual points of light into constellations, that they work together so that you have water and electricity and irrigation water and healthy ecosystems too, right? And that scales up to the larger economy, as well as the larger economy scaling back down to your resilience. So that's definitely the space where we want to be working. I hope that you'll consider joining our initiative, that you'll work with us. I personally would love to go to Liberia, and I would love to meet your water committee. And if you could give, I definitely want to thank the Humanitarian Hub and to our two support folks, especially Dominic, for their support. But if you could give yourselves and our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Nice job.